Hello, friends. I'm Julie from El Mundo de Pepita, and I have been wanting to make this video for the last few weeks and just have not had time to get to it. So I apologize for that because I know I had shared out on Facebook that I did have that intention. So the topic is choice baskets and independent work centers. There's a lot of different configurations or types of activities that might fall under this category. But I thought it might be helpful to do kind of a mini series, a short series of videos that give a little bit more information about how I've been working with these types of activities in my classes. Some things that works, maybe some things that don't, etc. So this is the first in that, and I really wanted to, in this, address a question that comes up quite a bit, and that has to do with expectations. Before I get to that, just very quickly, I have referenced in multiple posts my rationale for moving away from a class that is whole group for most of the class to incorporating more and more of these more independent type activities. And I will say that I won't get into all of the reasons, but with the shifting student needs, shifting student challenges, and really a recognition of some of the ways in which whole group is really hard for some students, whether that be because of a neurodiversity or a body size, or it could be introvert versus extrovert. There are a lot of different reasons why I've shifted away, and again, I've really tried to chronicle those. But this did start pre-pandemic, so even though the pandemic has definitely kind of accelerated some of these things, I was really moving in this direction before the pandemic hit. So as I mentioned, the question that has come to me most frequently has been around expectations. Like, what does this look like in terms of student acquisition, in terms of proficiency levels, language acquisition, language use, etc. So in thinking about that, I've certainly reflected on it many times, and in some ways I have felt like I was giving something up. In fact, I felt that way for a very long time. It's taken me years really of kind of trial and error and thinking about it, reflecting, to realize that in fact it's not that I'm giving something up. And I think that when we traditionally think about whole group instruction, we really are focusing on that verbal interaction more than anything else. So speaking and listening, right, and building those skills. And we have certainly, I would say, prioritized those, especially at the early lang level, at the elementary level. And we know, and I've always believed that best practice has really been around that, right? Like that interaction, those conversations, that authentic communication that is happening in circle, for example, at RUG. And it's taken me a really long time to envision and understand that it's not giving up those things, but rather shifting the priorities, or rather, even perhaps better for me to phrase it is that I've balanced out a little bit more the priorities in terms of what skills I'm working on, in terms of what opportunities I'm giving for students. So what do I mean by that? Again, like I said, I think that we've traditionally prioritized speaking and listening. What centers or choice basket activities, or those independent type activities, allow us to do is to perhaps balance some of that out with more reading and writing. And by reading and writing, I want to be very clear, I mean early literacy. And early literacy and pre-literacy may not also be what you're thinking of when I first say that, right? So It could be interacting with words. It could be interacting with letters. It could be interacting with print, copying. There's a lot of different components to early literacy. What I have found is that sight words, that's another one. What I have found is, for example, my introverts often excel in these activities, like the interpersonal where it's speaking and listening might not be their forte, but then if they're at small group, or they're doing a reading activity or a writing activity, a copying activity, something like that, categorizing, where they're still using the same vocabulary, but they're doing it in a different form, they excel. They feel more comfortable, for example. So this is what I mean by we're providing, if you know me, I advocate strongly for pre and early literacy skills. If you look at my resources, obviously print and reading and writing and building and developing those early literacy skills is a big component and part of my resources and my teaching. But I, definitely feel like what I have done is I've balanced out more to include that more often. And that's the shift that I mean in terms of, yes, maybe their proficiency level in speaking and listening might shift a little bit to where we're not getting as far along in the proficiency progress. But by the same token, some of those early literacy skills are being bumped up. And so whereas we might not have gotten very far at all, now we're moving a little bit further along in that way. And so it's, really kind of rethinking, like, well, and giving ourselves permission to say, I'm going to change my priorities a little. I'm going to shift those things in order to provide opportunities for my students that are outside of whole group. And again, that's not to say that I don't do whole group activities. I certainly do. I would say that especially in the primary level, my classes tend to look like, if you think about a 30-minute class, we probably are a whole group for 10 to 12 minutes before we then go back to tables and small groups to do more independent or small group activities. And this is not to say that I then don't get to interact with them in that speaking and listening mode. But instead of doing it in whole group, I try to circulate around and interact with individuals and utilize and practice and allow them those practical moments individually, right, at their seats as I'm coming around. And I do really find that to be valuable. And one of the reasons why, and this has taken me a long time to kind of identify this too, one of the things that I love about that is my introverts who wouldn't normally be doing a lot of participation in circle. When I kind of am right there with them, I can really prompt them in a different way than I can when it's whole group and I've got some antsy friends and, some other people who might be shouting out answers. So sometimes, or often I would say actually, I feel like the quality of the interaction that I have at table with that individual is better than when it is with whole group. Not to say, especially my extroverts, I tend to feel like, I get a lot of good quality out of them regardless of where they are. But for this other population who's definitely in my room, it does really increase the quality of that interaction with them. And so that also has been a long time for me to identify, kind of reflecting and thinking through all of these things. I still feel like I'm in process understanding this. And again, I've said a couple times now, like trial and error, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And so I continue to do that. But I hope that this has kind of given you a sense of what some of those expectations are when I think about how my class is functioning within the parameters of, obviously our goal is to teach language and perspectives and cultures and peoples and those things. And so like how can you foster that both at whole group and in these smaller groups? So then next in the series, I'm really going to try to give some specific examples in some additional videos, what that looks like, how I put them together, some logistics, etc. So be looking out for that, and I hope that this was helpful. Thanks for listening. Bye.